Have you ever felt ashamed, wronged, or exposed by situations you didn't cause? Have you ever experienced that silent pain of carrying a burden that seems too heavy, while everything around you seems to question your faith? Psalm 44, Part 2, verses 14 to 26, speaks precisely to this deep place in the soul. It shows us that even when we are wounded by shame, contempt, and a feeling of abandonment, we can still approach God with courage and sincerity. But before we continue, I want to invite you to share this video with someone who needs a strong word of hope, someone who may be about to give up. Subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to walk with us on this journey of faith through the Psalms. If you feel you are living through times when pain seems to have no answer, when humiliation echoes louder than victory, this part 2 of Psalm 44 is for you. If you are immersed in the deepest emotions, questioning God, exposing your shame, your vulnerability, and your weariness, but without breaking your trust, this part 2 of Psalm 44 is for you. David teaches us that believing is not feigning strength, but presenting a broken heart before a God who sees, hears, and understands. These verses comfort us when we wonder why God allows certain struggles, why it seems we are defeated even when we remain faithful, and why pain sometimes seems to last beyond what is bearable. In this second part, we will delve verse by verse, following this cry filled with truth, where the psalmist transforms his shame into supplication, his powerlessness into hope, and his pain into an intimate dialogue with God. Each reflection has been prepared to reach your soul, strengthen your confidence, and help you remember that being faithful, even when everything crumbles, is one of the most profound acts of worship. Stay with us until the end, because we will offer a prayer based on verses 14 to 26 of Psalm 44, a prayer prepared to quiet your heart, renew your confidence, and remind you that, even when the night seems long, God remains present, attentive, and faithful.
Verse 14, You have made us a byword among the nations, a laughingstock and a derision among the peoples.
David expresses his distress at the ridicule and mockery that befalls God's people. He does not hide his frustration at being the target of criticism and malicious comments, but maintains his dialogue with the Lord, trusting that only God understands the true dignity of his people. Each word reveals the sincerity of a soul that seeks justice and recognition before the Creator. Even when others despise us, the heart can remain steadfast in faith. There are times when the scorn of others hurts more than any blow, and the soul seems to shrink before the mocking voices. But it is precisely then that God calls us near, to a place where human opinion loses its power and only His voice remains. In the silence of prayer, He gathers every hidden tear and clothes the heart with a dignity that no one can steal. It is in the hiding place of divine presence that we discover that we are not defined by scorn, but by the loving gaze of the One who created us. And there, between pain and faith, the heart learns to remain standing, even when the world tries to reduce us to dust. Applying this to our times, this verse challenges us to face ridicule and judgment without losing faith in God. We are called to maintain integrity and faith, even when we feel exposed or misunderstood. David's example inspires us to stand firm amidst criticism and mockery. He reminds us that our true worth comes from God, not from human recognition, and that we can continue confidently, even when the world mocks us. To reflect, how do we react when we are the butt of jokes or scorn? Are we trusting in God or letting ourselves be shaken by the opinions of others? How can we strengthen our faith in the face of ridicule and criticism?
Verse 15, My confusion is always before me, and the shame on my face overwhelms me.
David expresses here the profound pain of feeling humiliated, as if his entire life were exposed before eyes that do not understand his story. It is the cry of a weary heart, enveloped in shame, powerless in the face of circumstances and the criticism around him. He shows us that it is human to feel cornered, that admitting one's own fragility does not diminish faith. Recognizing shame is the first step in surrendering the situation to God and allowing Him to transform pain into learning. There are times when shame weighs like a dark veil over the soul, and we feel that every glance around us hurts us a little more. But it is in these moments that God calls us to rest in His lap, where no accusation reaches and no criticism defines who we are. He tenderly searches the heart and knows the stories that no one has seen, the silent efforts, the inner battles. Before Him, shame loses its power, because His grace covers what we try to hide. And in the silence of prayer, He transforms what humiliates us into seeds of healing and restoration. Today, this verse reminds us that we can present our weaknesses to God without fear. He understands our shame, welcomes our tears, and gives us strength to face judgment and embarrassing situations. Instead of hiding, we can seek His presence, learn from our mistakes, and trust that He renews us, even when our faces seem covered in shame. To reflect, have I been hiding my shame or surrendering it to God? How can I learn to cope with exposure without losing faith? Am I allowing Him to transform my shame into strength to move forward?
Verse 16. The voice of those who insult and blaspheme, because of the enemy and the avenger.
David feels the weight of words that cut like sharp blades, voices that mock, accuse, and challenge his faith. Each affront echoes in his heart, as if the world were conspiring against hope. He teaches us that it is legitimate to feel pain in the face of injustice, but also not to allow these voices to steal our intimacy with God. Even cornered, David cries out silently, keeping his gaze fixed on the Lord's protection, finding refuge and courage in Him. There are times when the words of others seem to pierce the soul, and everything within us longs to be silent and retreat. But it is precisely in these moments that the heart learns to whisper God's name with greater tenderness. Between accusation and silence, a more conscious faith is born, finding refuge not in the absence of conflict, but in the constant presence of the Lord. Each attack becomes an opportunity to firmly plant our steps on the eternal rock. And while the world hurls insults, God envelopes us with a peace that cannot be explained, only experienced. It is in this sacred space, between pain and hope, that the soul discovers its true strength. Today, we are called not to be discouraged by the verbal attacks, criticism, or mockery that arise around us. We can take each affront to the Lord, allowing Him to transform pain into strength and humiliation into a testimony of trust. When the world challenges us, it is time to stand firm, recognizing that our faith does not depend on human approval, but on God's faithfulness. To reflect, how do I react when I am unfairly offended or criticized? Am I able to surrender my pain and indignation to God? Am I maintaining my faith even when opposing voices surround me?
Verse 17. All this has happened to us, yet we have not forgotten you, nor have we dealt falsely with your covenant.
Even in the face of defeats, losses, and humiliations, David keeps his heart turned toward God. He shows us that it is possible to weather storms without breaking faithfulness, without betraying the covenant with the Lord. Every blow, every pain, every persecution did not distance him from his trust in the God who is his refuge. This perseverance reveals the strength of a faith that recognizes that God is greater than any adversity. Even surrounded by difficulties, David cries out in sincerity, maintaining the purity of his heart before the Most High. There are times when the soul seems to tremble, yet still refuses to let go of God's hand. It is in this silent place, where pain meets hope, that true faithfulness is tested. When everything crumbles around us and we still choose to remain, something eternal ignites within us. David shows us that mature faith is not made of the absence of struggles, but of the constant decision not to abandon the path of trust. Even when the ground gives way, the soul learns to rest in the gentle certainty that God remains God. It is there that obedience transforms into silent worship. In these times, we are challenged to remain faithful even when life surprises us with trials. Continuing to trust and honor God, without falsehood or deceit, is an act of courage and devotion. We can reflect on our own loyalties. In the face of suffering, do we maintain our integrity or do we succumb to bitterness and abandon our faith? To reflect, can I maintain my faithfulness to God amidst difficulties? Does my faith remain sincere even when everything goes wrong? How can I honor my covenant with God daily, without deception or false promises?
Verse 18. Our hearts have not turned back, nor have our steps strayed from your paths.
David shows us that perseverance in faith is built day by day, even amidst adversity. His heart remains steadfast, his walk aligned with God's ways, even when everything around him seems to crumble. He teaches us that following God is a continuous commitment that demands resilience and trust. Each step taken in obedience strengthens the soul and keeps hope alive, even in times of confusion and oppression. It is a call not to allow difficulties to divert our gaze from the Lord. There are times when the path seems too narrow and God's silence weighs like a veil on our shoulders, yet the heart still chooses to persevere. It is in this place of silent surrender that faith reveals itself most purely, sustaining steps that sometimes tremble. Each decision to continue, even without answers, becomes a seed planted in the soil of trust. And while the soul insists on moving forward, God secretly weaves strengths we do not yet perceive. Faithfulness amidst chaos transforms into praise, a living declaration that love for God is greater than any storm. In today's world, standing firm in God's ways means choosing integrity and faith over frustration and fear. We can apply this to our daily decisions, seeking to act according to God's truth, even when it seems that no one notices or values our efforts. Every choice to remain in the truth strengthens our faith and builds character. Persisting in God's ways prepares us to witness His faithfulness in all situations. To reflect, have I kept my heart steadfast even in difficult times? Do my actions reflect my commitment to God? Am I walking in faithfulness, even when no one is watching?
Verse 19. Even though we were brought low to the point of death, and you covered us with the shadow of death.
David shows us here the overwhelming reality of adversity, when fear and pressure seem to surround us on all sides. Even amidst extreme danger, he does not succumb to despair, but turns his heart to God. This verse reminds us that true faith manifests itself when we maintain our trust even in the face of death or chaos. It teaches us that no matter how intense the suffering, God's presence can be our refuge. Learning to cry out even in despair is an act of spiritual courage. There are times when the soul seems to walk through valleys where the light does not reach, and each step echoes like a silent cry for help. It is in these moments that we realize how faith is more than words. It is breath, it is sustenance, it is the invisible thread that keeps us standing when everything threatens to crumble. David reminds us that, even surrounded by shadows, there is a God who sees beyond the chaos and welcomes the trembling heart. When fear envelopes us like a cold embrace, we can find in the Lord the warmth of a presence that never abandons us. And so, even trembling, we continue trusting, because we know that the hand that guides us is stronger than the abyss that tries to frighten us. Today, this verse challenges us to remain steadfast amidst the crises that surround us, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. It inspires us not to allow fear or environmental pressure to cause us to give up our trust in God. We can apply this to situations of family conflict, financial difficulties, or moments of profound loneliness. Even when all seems lost, choosing to return to God is affirming our faith. May this example of David teach us to face the darkness with renewed courage and hope. To reflect, have I trusted in God even in the darkest moments? How can I remember His presence when all seems lost? Am I keeping my heart steadfast despite adversity?
Verse 20. If we forget the name of our God and stretch out our hands to a strange God.
David here confronts us with the seriousness of spiritual unfaithfulness, even in times of affliction. He acknowledges that pain and pressure can lead us to seek solutions in the wrong places, far from God's faithfulness. This verse reminds us that the human heart is fragile and easily tempted to stray. David's sincerity is an invitation to reflection, to confess our failings and reaffirm our commitment to God. He shows us that recognizing temptation is the first step to remaining steadfast in faith. There are times when the soul, weary from so many battles, almost leans towards paths that do not lead to life. In those silent hours, when the heart seeks any shadow of relief, we realize how fragile and susceptible we are to abandoning what is sacred. But it is precisely there, at the limit of pain, that the voice of God whispers loudest, calling us back to the center of faithfulness. He reminds us that no human promise can sustain the weight of our anguish, and that no shortcut can heal the wound that only His presence can reach. The arms of God that never cease to wait for us. Today, this verse challenges us to examine where we place our trust when we feel helpless. We may be tempted to seek security in money, power, relationships, or distractions that replace God's presence. Applying this teaching means intentionally choosing to return to the Lord, even when alternatives seem more attractive. It is a call to constant spiritual vigilance and genuine faithfulness. May this warning inspire us to keep our hands outstretched only to the true God. To reflect, have I sought solutions outside of God in times of pressure? Where do I place my trust first when I feel lost? Am I committed to remaining faithful even in the face of temptation?
Verse 21. Perhaps God does not scrutinize, for He knows the secrets of the heart.
David reminds us that nothing escapes God's gaze, not even our most intimate thoughts or hidden motivations. He challenges us to live with integrity, knowing that the Lord knows every detail of our inner life. This verse is like a mirror of the soul, showing that there is no need for pretense before God. The awareness that He sees everything calls us to sincerity and humility. Thus, we are invited to open our hearts, confess our fears, guilt, and doubts without fear or shame. David invites us here to realize that, even in moments of silence and apparent abandonment, God observes, knows, and cares about every detail of our lives. No suffering, no tear, no gesture of love or weakness goes unnoticed by His eyes. He calls us to live authentically, without masks, knowing that our spiritual honesty is welcomed and valued. Every intention, even the most hidden, can be offered to Him in sincere prayer. This awareness draws us closer to God and strengthens our confidence that He acts even when we do not see. In our daily lives, this verse inspires us to examine our own intentions and actions. It reminds us that God perceives every gesture and every decision, even when no one else is watching. Applying this means seeking consistency between our faith and our attitudes, living with transparency and honesty before the Lord and others. It is an invitation to inner vigilance and constant sincerity, strengthening our trust in God. To reflect, have I been truthful before God in my thoughts and actions? Am I hiding something I need to confess? How can I live more transparently before the Lord today?
Verse 22. Yes, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered.
David expresses here the daily weight of suffering and oppression that the people face, even while remaining faithful to God. He shows us the harsh reality of persecution and contempt, as if each day were a struggle for life and faith. This verse reveals the courage to remain steadfast, even when we are treated as weak or insignificant. It is a profound cry that mixes pain, surrender, and trust in God. He teaches us that faithfulness often comes with trials, but that we should not lose hope. Even in the face of daily oppression, David teaches us not to allow the weight of injustice to steal our trust in God. Every difficulty can become an opportunity to draw closer to Him, surrendering pain and weariness in sincere prayer. He shows us that true faith remains firm even when the world ignores or despises us. Trusting God in these moments strengthens the heart and keeps hope alive. It is an invitation to recognize that our strength comes from the Lord and that He is faithful to sustain every step. Thus, perseverance becomes a silent testimony of divine faithfulness. In everyday life, this verse challenges us to remain faithful and upright, even when we feel wronged or rejected. It reminds us that the path of faith is not always easy and that difficulties do not negate our relationship with God. Applying this means facing challenges with courage, trusting in God in the face of oppression, and keeping faith active even in adversity. It is an invitation to live with spiritual resilience and constant hope. To reflect, have I maintained my faith even during difficult times? How do I react to injustice or contempt? Am I trusting in God even when everything seems lost?
Verse 23. Awake, why do you sleep, Lord? Arise, do not reject us forever.
The psalmist here cries out urgently, reflecting a feeling of abandonment in the face of tribulations. David shows us that it is human to feel God's delay and question His apparent inaction, but he does so while maintaining trust. It is a profound request, made with courage and intimacy, as one who speaks to the Father without reservation. He reminds us that even in moments of divine silence, we can bring our anxieties to God's presence. The verse teaches us that sincere prayer is legitimate and necessary, even when there are no immediate answers. Between feelings of abandonment and unwavering trust, David teaches us that it is possible to remain close to God even when the silence seems to drag on. Each cry is a bridge connecting human pain to divine faithfulness, an act of spiritual courage that strengthens the soul. He shows us that questioning is not rebellion, but an expression of intimacy and dependence. We can bring our anxieties without reservation, trusting that God understands every tear and every unspoken word. In daily practice, this verse invites us to take our frustrations and doubts to God, without fear of questioning. It means acknowledging our feelings and asking for His intervention, maintaining faith that He hears and acts in His own time. Applying this teaching means not remaining silent in the face of pain, but seeking God's presence with honesty and hope. It is an invitation to pray with courage, even when all seems lost. To reflect, have I honestly shared my anxieties with God? Do I trust that He is still present even in silence? How can I persevere in prayer when I feel He is delaying?
Verse 24. Why do you hide your face and forget our misery and our oppression?
David here expresses a profound feeling of abandonment, questioning God's apparent absence in the face of suffering. He is not afraid to show his pain, his doubts, and his frustration, for he knows he can take everything to the Lord. It is an intimate outpouring, reflecting the vulnerability of the human heart in the face of life's injustices and difficulties. The verse teaches us that it is possible to be honest with God, even when we do not understand His ways. It reminds us that faith does not exclude questioning, but finds in prayer a safe space to express itself. Between questioning and surrender, David shows us that taking our pain to God is an act of trust, not weakness. Each sincere outpouring strengthens our intimacy with the Lord and draws us closer to His comforting presence. He teaches us that we don't need to hide our doubts or feelings of abandonment. God understands the human heart in its entirety. The psalm reveals that mature faith includes moments of profound questioning, but that these remain rooted in hope. In our daily lives, this verse invites us not to repress our pain or frustration, but to present them to God with courage. It is a call to acknowledge our difficulties and seek His guidance even when He seems distant. Applying this teaching means praying sincerely, allowing God to transform anguish into renewed confidence. It means learning to maintain dialogue with God even in moments of silence and apparent forgetfulness. To reflect, have I been hiding my pain from God, or have I brought it to Him? Do I trust that He sees my oppression even when everything seems silent? How can I maintain my faith in the face of apparent divine absence?
Verse 25. For our soul is bowed down to the dust, our belly clings to the earth.
David describes here the depth of the people's humiliation and suffering, using powerful imagery to show how crushed and helpless they feel. He doesn't hide their collective dejection, but brings it before God, acknowledging that only He can lift up the fallen. This verse reveals the intensity of pain when injustice and oppression seem to dominate, and reminds us that expressing our dejection is not weakness, but a step toward surrender and trust. Between pain and surrender, David shows us that crying out to God is an act of courage and faith. Every tear, every feeling of helplessness brought to the Lord strengthens the soul and paves the way for restoration. He teaches us that we don't need to hide our wounds, because God knows the depth of our suffering. Honesty before the Creator transforms anguish into hope and draws us closer to His comforting presence. Even when oppression seems unbearable, trusting in God allows us to find the strength to continue. In these times, this verse challenges us to recognize our fragility in the face of difficulties and to seek God as a source of support. Applying this teaching means accepting our limitations, without blaming ourselves for feeling downcast, and surrendering our anxieties and pains to Him. It is allowing faith to sustain us when everything around us oppresses us, trusting that God has the power to lift us up. Even amidst feelings of despair, we can keep our gaze fixed on His presence. To reflect, am I taking my discouragement to God or trying to carry it alone? Do I trust that He can lift me from the dust of sorrow? How can I allow my faith to grow stronger even in the deepest pain?
Verse 26. Rise up to our aid, and rescue us for the sake of your mercies.
Here David concludes the psalm with a firm and hopeful cry. After expressing all his pain, humiliation, and discouragement, he turns again to God, remembering divine faithfulness and compassion. It is a request that is not limited to physical intervention, but involves spiritual and emotional rescue, trusting in the Lord's constant love. This verse reveals a mature confidence. Even in the midst of darkness, there is hope in God's mercy. It teaches us to ask for help without reservation, knowing that the Lord is just and compassionate. Today, this verse challenges us not to expect help to come only from ourselves or from circumstances, but to actively seek God's help. Applying this teaching means crying out to Him in times of difficulty, trusting that His mercies are infinite, and allowing His action to transform our reality. It is an invitation to surrender control and believe that divine rescue can come in unexpected ways. Keeping our hearts open to God's intervention gives us the courage to face adversity with faith and hope. To reflect, am I seeking God's help or trying to solve everything on my own? Do I trust that His mercy can rescue me even when it seems impossible? How can I remain steadfast in faith while awaiting His intervention? Psalm 44, Part 2, verses 14 to 26, leads us down an even deeper path of collective pain, public shame, and apparent divine silence. Here, the psalmist does not recall past victories, but describes the reality of a faithful people who, even without having turned away from God, experience rejection, mockery, and defeat. These verses reveal the anguish of those who suffer unjustly and find no immediate explanations, but choose to remain loyal. It is a portrait of a faith tested in the fire, which is not sustained by results, but by commitment to God. As we progress through these verses, we learn that faithfulness does not exempt us from pain, nor does obedience free us from moments of perplexity. The psalmist declares that the heart has not strayed, that the covenant has not been broken, yet oppression remains. This teaches us that there are seasons in which suffering is not a consequence of error, but part of a greater mystery. Even so, prayer does not cease, it intensifies. Pain does not generate estrangement, but an even bolder cry. In the final verses, the cry becomes direct, urgent, and almost desperate. Awake! Why are you sleeping, Lord? This is not irreverence. but profound intimacy. It is the language of one who knows God well enough to speak to him without masks. The psalm ends not with answers, but with a plea for redemption based on the Lord's loyal love. This shows us that, even when all seems lost, hope still finds a place in God's faithful character. Now that we understand the meaning of each verse of Psalm 44, Part 2, verses 14 to 26, I invite you to continue meditating and praying over the next 6 days. Read each verse as an expression of faith that does not deny pain, but also does not abandon trust. Allow this psalm to teach you to remain steadfast even when there are no explanations, when the silence seems prolonged, and when injustice tries to shake your hope. May these words strengthen your heart on the days when faith is put to the test. And to seal this message in our hearts, we invite you to pray and keep with you this prayer inspired by Psalm 44, Part 2, verses 14 to 26. Return to it whenever you feel the weight of misunderstanding, when faithfulness seems unrewarded, or when God's silence seems difficult to bear. May these words renew your confidence in the Lord's loyal love, which never abandons His own. Remain steadfast, even in waiting, for He sees, He knows, and He acts in His own time.
Prayer inspired by Psalm 44, Part 2, verses 14 to 26. Almighty God, before you we stand with our hearts laid bare, like the psalmist who did not hide his pain or his weariness. You see when we are humiliated, when the weight of our losses silences us, and when shame tries to define us. Even when it seems that you hide yourself, we choose to cry out, because we know that you remain faithful. We do not speak out of merit, but out of necessity, not out of strength, but out of dependence. Receive our cry that springs from a wounded soul, yet one that still trusts. Even prostrate, we turn to you, because only you know the paths to restoration. Hear us, Lord, when the silence seems too long. Lift us up, O God, from the place where pain has cast us. Do not let suffering have the last word on our story. Though we are brought low, do not let us be forgotten. Though we are pressed, do not let us be defeated. Remember your mercy, which never fails, and your love, which never runs out. He sees our tears, our restless nights, and our weary but sincere prayers. Intervene with your power when our strength no longer holds. Teach us to wait even when we do not understand, and to trust even when everything seems contrary. For the sake of your name, come to our aid, Lord. He rescues us not only from circumstances, but also from the discouragement that tries to take root in our hearts. He renews our hope when our souls are broken to the dust and the future seems uncertain. May your rising be stronger than any fall, and may your faithfulness sustain us to the end. We choose to remain steadfast, even wounded, because we know in whom we have believed. May this prayer accompany us in difficult days, reminding us that you see, you act, and you remain. In you we hope, today and always. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Now I want to reinforce the invitation I made at the beginning. If this message has edified your life, like the video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that God sees, hears, and helps in times of distress. Psalm 44 shows us that, even when we face oppression, confusion, or humiliation, the Lord remains faithful, strengthens our faith, and renews the hope of His people. He teaches us to cry out with courage, to wait with perseverance, and to trust that our help is eternal. And before we finish, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave your prayer request in the comments. It will be a joy to intercede for you. May God renew your strength, steady your steps, rekindle hope in your heart, and accompany every detail of your journey. Until the next video, may God bless your life, your family, and your business.